At 40, my husband cheated on me with his young secretary. To make things worse, my own son treated her like a second mother. He even once said to me, "Look at you, covered in freckles, ugly and dumb. How could you ever be good enough for my dad?" Humiliated and pressured by both father and son, I finally signed the divorce papers, tears burning in my eyes as I walked away. When I stepped into the cab dragging my worn-out suitcase behind me, I thought that was the end of it. But then my son followed, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. "Mom, that $2 million? I fought for it. Don't think you can keep it all to yourself." At the company's anniversary gala, my husband, Robert Collins, held his young secretary, Olivia, in his arms as they twirled across the dance floor. Her red dress billowed, catching not just his eye but his heart as well. My son, Michael, walked over with a champagne flute in hand, sneering as he glanced at me. "Had enough of the show?" Then, without waiting for an answer, he looked me up and down, his voice dripping with disdain. "Look at yourself. That dull dress, those age spots. What are you even wearing? If I were you, I'd take the money and leave while I still could." I turned to him, my 16-year-old son, and felt tears well up. Michael chuckled and strolled off, his champagne glass catching the light as he approached Robert and Olivia, who had just stepped off the dance floor. He clinked glasses with Olivia, their laughter blending seamlessly with the music. Michael whispered something to her, making Olivia giggle behind her hand in an almost coy manner. Robert gave Michael a playful punch on the shoulder, his expression filled with fatherly indulgence. Michael clutched his chest theatrically, yelping in mock pain, making both Robert and Olivia laugh. They looked like a perfect little family, my husband, his mistress, and my own son. Tears burned my eyes once again. I lowered my gaze to my black dress, swallowed the lump in my throat, and quietly walked away. I sat alone in the darkness, memories replaying like a cruel, unrelenting reel. 6 months ago, an anonymous video arrived on my phone. A dimly lit hotel suite. A king-sized bed. And on it, Robert and Olivia, completely bare, tangled in each other's arms. When I confronted him, he simply scoffed and muttered, "I had too much to drink." Before I could unleash my fury, he grabbed his coat, slammed the door, and vanished. For a week he didn't return. And when he finally resurfaced, it wasn't to come home, it was to sign off on a new house. A luxury apartment in the city, where he set Olivia up comfortably. A young, polished business school graduate with a British accent. What a fine match. At the time, Michael was preparing his application for an elite prep school. I couldn't afford a scandal, so I swallowed my grief, argued with Robert in hushed tones at night, and wiped away silent tears while waiting for him to come home. But he never did. At midnight they finally returned, their voices light with laughter as they stepped through the door. I wiped my face dry, straightened my back, and said calmly, "Robert, let's get a divorce." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up a glass and poured himself some water. Michael casually kicked off his shoes, grabbed his father's arm, and led him into the study. I had no idea how much time passed before they emerged again. Robert approached me, a hint of guilt flickering in his eyes. "Diana, I owe you this much. Let's just get it over with. Name your terms." I shook my head. I had already lost my husband. And my son, my own flesh and blood, was nothing but a cold-hearted opportunist. What was left to fight for? I wiped my tears only to hear Michael scoff again. "Mom, you know Dad's reputation means everything in business. Do you really want to ruin that? People are already talking about him and Olivia. If you leave without taking a dime, what do you think they'll say? They'll call him heartless. A man who abandoned his wife without a penny." Through my blurry vision, I turned to Robert. He looked conflicted. So even my silence was a mistake. Was my suffering such an inconvenience to their carefully constructed narrative? Robert let out a slow breath before speaking. "Fine. You can have the Catskills villa. But forget about the company shares. You wouldn't know how to manage them anyway. We'll cash you out $2 million. That's more than fair. Take it, sign the papers, and walk away. Don't bother Dad again." I let out a bitter laugh. Like father, like son. The Collins bloodline truly ran cold. Robert started to say something else, but Michael leaned in and whispered a few words in his ear. Robert's frown softened and a small smile played at the corners of his lips. He patted Michael's shoulder approvingly. "All right, son. I trust you. Then turning back to me he put on a performance of reluctant regret. Let's make it official. Tomorrow morning 8 o'clock. I'll have the lawyer ready. Just sign the papers and move on, Diana. With that he shut the bedroom door with a decisive click. A sharp, cutting finality. And just like that my marriage was over. Robert and I had built everything from nothing side by side. We had been partners in struggle, bound by hardship and ambition. I thought stepping away from the business to be a devoted wife and mother would bring stability, a home filled with love. I never imagined that, in the end, hearts could change so completely. What once was mutual support had rotted into contempt and disgust. The next morning I was shaken awake by Michael. Hurry up, he urged, already impatient. We need to go. I sat up slowly, watching him rush me as if he was more eager to get this divorce over with than his philandering father. On the way to the courthouse he didn't hesitate to announce his plans. I'll be staying with Dad, of course. If I stick with you I might starve to death. I turned to him. My son, the same boy who had once clung to my hand, called me Mommy with bright eyes and promised to take care of me when he grew up. At what point had he changed? Had the selfishness in Robert's blood been passed down so easily? I signed the papers. There was still a mandatory asset assessment period before finalizing everything. Michael handed my old, worn-out purse to Robert and whispered something in his ear. Whatever he said made Robert beam. His mood instantly lifted. Michael, however, turned back to me with a straight face. Come on, I'll take you to the villa. No need to go off hiding and crying alone like some dramatic housewife. His grip was firm as he pulled me toward the car. I wanted to shake him off. But in the end I couldn't. The villa was spotless when we arrived, cleaned from top to bottom. A housekeeper was already inside, setting the table. I sat numbly at the dining room table as plates of elegantly plated food were placed in front of me. Michael ladled a bowl of seafood porridge and slid it toward me. This $2 million includes my living expenses, so you better start cooking for me. And don't skimp on the groceries. I hired a housekeeper to help. I'll cover her pay, but you better not cheap out on my meals. I took a spoonful of the soup, but all I could taste was bitterness. Still, thinking about how divorce could affect Michael, I forced myself to say, Mikey, your father and I divorced because of our own issues. I don't want you to overthink things. Just focus on your studies, okay? Michael let out a sharp laugh. Overthink. He took a deep sip of his porridge, his expression indifferent. I've got food, a roof over my head, and now I even have a stepmother to spoil me. Life's good. Then he rolled his eyes and added, Oh, please. Don't tell me you're acting like one of those tragic housewives from the 80s. You're better than that. He spoke so casually, so detached as he ate heartily, completely unbothered. For some reason, that nonchalance, his complete lack of concern, made the weight on my chest feel lighter. After eating, Michael disappeared. I walked through the villa, noticing the small touches. New potted plants, fresh linens, rooms that had been rearranged to feel warmer, cozier. Lying on the large bed, sunlight streaming in through the windows, I realized, maybe life wouldn't be so unbearable after all. At noon, the housekeeper prepared ribs, seafood, and a special soup I loved. Robert was allergic to seafood. I had almost forgotten what it tasted like. Sitting at the dining table alone, savoring every bite, my mood finally began to lift. That night, I hesitated before picking up my phone. I wanted to ask Michael if he'd come home for dinner. Before I could type, my screen lit up. A new notification. A photo. Michael, Olivia, and Robert, clinking glasses, arms draped around each other. A dimly lit, upscale restaurant. Red wine. Smiling faces. My fingers trembled as I traced the screen, scrolling through the pictures over and over. Tears fell one by one. Michael's love existed, but just barely. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a dull, empty ache spreading through my chest. 20 years of devotion. And in the end? A joke. The bedroom light suddenly flicked on. I shielded my eyes from the brightness, squinting to see Michael standing by the door. God, look at you. Pathetic. Michael gives me a deadpan stare, full of exaggerated disappointment. With a sharp flick of his wrist, he tosses a wad of cash at me. Here, sign up for a yoga class. Get your hair done. Buy some decent clothes. Next time there's a parent-teacher conference, try not to embarrass me. I sat up abruptly. Where the hell did you get all this money? You didn't? Michael rolled his eyes. Can you not assume the worst for once? It's a big day. Dad's in a great mood, so he handed me some cash. He nudged me. Come on, get up. I brought you a steak from that fancy French place. Eat it before it gets cold. Michael grabbed my arm and practically dragged me downstairs. Sitting at the dining table, chewing on the perfectly cooked steak, I couldn't stop my tears from falling. Michael let out a small chuckle and handed me a napkin. Mom, what kind of mother are you? Crying all the damn time. You're turning me soft. Then for the first time in a long while he held my hand. His voice turned serious. Mom, from now on just live for yourself. Leave the money stuff to me. I'm his only son. You really think he won't give me money? Just watch. 3 days later, Michael came home with another 20 grand. I stared at him, stunned. Robert might be a well-known businessman, but he was infamously stingy. I used to get only $4,000 a month for household expenses. Just days ago, Michael had already taken 10 grand. And now, another 20? Michael slung an arm around my shoulder. French, literature, math, physics. Tutoring fees, 30 grand. I promised I'd make top 50 by the finals. I nodded. Then go ahead and register. Michael plopped the cash into my hands instead. I changed my mind. I'll skip French and literature. I'll study them myself. I frowned. Michael, academics are important. You can't just. Before I could finish, Michael shoved the money into my lap and nudged me toward the door. Relax. Trust your son's genius. I'll at least crack the top 100 next time. Then, as if it were an afterthought, he smirked. By the way, did you book your yoga and spa treatments yet? If you don't start looking decent soon, I'll make Olivia attend parent-teacher conferences instead. Standing at the doorway, holding the thick stack of cash, I let out a long breath before finally heading out. For 10 days, Michael didn't show up at the villa. When he finally did, he slammed a form onto the table. This is a business school training program. You're an embarrassment. Go learn something. At least try to keep up with the world. I hesitated. I'm 40, Michael. What's the point of going back to school now? Michael immediately darkened his expression. Fine. Don't go. Just don't blame me when you end up clueless, outdated, and irrelevant. He leaned back and smirked. I'll just acknowledge Olivia as my only mother figure. You can't call me ungrateful if you don't even try to keep up. He shot me a pointed look. You can't expect me to force my future wife and kids to like someone who refuses to evolve, right? I clenched my teeth and nodded firmly. Fine. I'll go. Michael grinned, satisfied. Now that's more like it. Then he flopped onto my shoulder, flashing me a mischievous smile. Mom, you'll be surrounded by elites. Try not to bring home a stepdad, okay? I smacked his head lightly. Brat. I'm too old for that nonsense. Michael darted away, laughing. You're rich now. Do you have any idea how many people would be interested? No worries, though. If you do find someone, I'll approve. Watching him run off, I instinctively reached into my pocket. A fresh stack of crisp $100 bills sat inside. My vision blurred with unshed tears. I had terrible taste in men. But at least I gave birth to a gem. The business school program was mostly filled with young professionals, though a few were around my age. Within a week, I'd made friends, joined casual dinners, and even got dragged along for late-night karaoke sessions. It was lively. It was fun. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The only problem? I was terrible at studying. Years of managing a household had erased everything I once knew. One evening, Michael picked up my graded test paper. A big, fat F staring him in the face. He snorted. Mom, how about we make this interesting? I rolled my eyes. What? You want a competition? Michael smirked. What, you scared? Tell you what, next exam I'll get an A+. Try and beat me. To avoid embarrassing myself in front of Michael, I threw myself completely into studying. For the first time in months, the shadow of my divorce faded into the background. A month passed in the blink of an eye. The asset division was nearly complete when Robert and his lawyer came to pick me up. I pulled open the car door, only to see Olivia smugly seated in the passenger seat. She turned to me, her lips curving into a delicate smile. Diana, I haven't been feeling well lately, so Robert insisted I take the front seat. You don't mind, do you? I stared straight ahead, my expression unreadable. The old me would have lost my temper, demanded a fight, refused to let her get away with her little mind games. Olivia would have played her part perfectly, hiding behind Robert, whispering fake concerns, making herself look like the understanding one. But now I just wanted to wrap this up and get back to my class. Frank had promised to walk me through that must-know exam question during our 30-minute break. Why would I waste my time on Olivia? I swung open the back door without hesitation and got in. Robert, let's get this over with. I have somewhere to be. With the paperwork finalized, I strode out of the office without looking back. Robert hurried after me as if wanting to say something, when suddenly a sharp, "Oh," rang out from behind us. I turned just in time to see Olivia dramatically twisting her ankle. I let out a quiet scoff, hailed a cab and climbed in without hesitation. I had 20 minutes before my next class. Would Frank still be willing to go over the problem with me? Damn Robert, dragging things out with pointless small talk. And the nerve, he even had the audacity to invite me to lunch. What, just because I looked good today he wanted an excuse to stare? Men really couldn't handle a woman in a striking dress. That night, just as I finished my assignments and lay down in bed, my phone lit up with a message from Michael. Parent-teacher conference tomorrow. Can you come? I typed back, is your dad going? Yeah. There's a surprise. I hesitated for a second then replied. A surprise? Now I have to see this. Michael didn't respond after that. I put my phone down and stared at the ceiling. Half a year had passed. Michael always acted cheerful like he didn't care, but sometimes I'd catch him staring off into the distance as if searching for something unseen. There was a depth to his words now, a sharpness in the way he spoke. Maybe, no matter how much he pretended, the divorce had affected him. I sighed, guilt creeping in. At the end of the day he was still only 16. The next morning I got up early, booked a hair appointment and slipped into a fitted dress and heels. Spending time at business school had taught me one thing. A well-dressed woman commanded attention. Even I couldn't help but admire the girls in my class. Their cascading waves, perfect waist-to-hip ratio. It was a whole aesthetic and energy. When I arrived at school, Michael's face lit up. He practically bounced over and grabbed my wrist, leading me to my seat. Not even a minute later, Robert walked in, Olivia on his arm. But here's the thing, all the seats were taken, which meant Robert had to sit beside me. And Olivia? She was left standing in the hallway, fuming. Michael had actually pulled it off. He ranked 98th in the entire school. A leap of over 100 places from last semester. The teachers praised him endlessly, and Robert was even invited to give a speech as a model parent. As we stepped out of the classroom, Robert beamed, slinging an arm over Michael's shoulder. Then turning to me he said, almost softly, almost regretfully, "Diana, you look beautiful today. And, thank you for raising Michael so well." I let out a quiet laugh. Robert and I were both failures. What right did we have to take credit for Michael's success? If anything, Michael had been the one raising me. But before I could respond, Michael grinned mischievously and hugged his father's arm. "Dad, your son did you proud today, huh? How about a little reward?" He held out his hand expectantly. Robert chuckled, already reaching for his wallet. Greedy little brat. Just as Robert pulled out a stack of bills to count, Michael swiped the whole thing. Why bother counting? I'll put it toward an advanced math course. Next time I'm breaking top 50. Robert blinked at his now empty hand, then burst out laughing, smacking Michael playfully on the head. "Fine. As long as you keep this up, I'll give you whatever you want." Michael immediately seized the opportunity. "You said it, Dad. If I crack the top 50 next semester, buy me a car. A BMW. I want my mom to drive it." Michael's voice was casual but firm. "She'll bring me home-cooked meals every day. The school lunches aren't nutritious enough." Just as the words left his mouth, Olivia rushed over. "Mikey, the housekeeper can bring you meals. There's no need to buy a car just for that." Michael's gaze flickered to her stomach. He squinted then grinned. "Olivia, your priority right now is giving me a baby brother." His voice was light, almost playful. "Dad's business is growing. How am I supposed to handle it all alone in the future?" Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough for the words to hit where it hurt. "Besides, Dad told me himself, he's only making things official with you once you have a Collins child." A shadow crossed Olivia's face. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. "Robert, is that really what you think?" I didn't wait for the fallout. As soon as I saw the tension between them escalate, Michael grabbed my hand and we disappeared into the crowd. Back home, I emptied my pockets and counted $22,000. I looked over at Michael, hunched over his desk, diligently studying. My chest tightened. It was my turn to hold this family together. 20 years ago, Robert and I had started with nothing. With barely $100 between us, we knocked on doors, pitching products to anyone who would listen. Eventually, we built our e-commerce trade business from the ground up. So why couldn't I do it again? This time, I wasn't starting with nothing. I had $2 million to work with. I told Michael about my idea. He set his pen down, staring at me seriously. Mom, I won't stop you from going into business. But you have to be smart. Take your time, study the market just like picking a man. Plan first, act later. I burst into laughter. Picking a man? And what experience do you have in that? Michael blinked, then pursed his lips in mock seriousness. Well, considering your track record, you're terrible at it. But you did a great job having me. I doubled over laughing. This kid really knew how to flatter himself. Then Michael got thoughtful. You used to be in trade. Why not discuss market trends with your classmates? They're all top-tier professionals, they'll have insight. At that moment, a familiar face popped into my mind, Frank. A round-bellied man with a friendly, honest smile. He had been in trade too. The next day during our break, I pitched my idea to Frank. His response was instant enthusiasm. Brilliant. And listen, I'll be your secretary. No charge. Turns out, Frank used to run a successful trade company but handed it over to his son's family. Now retired and bored, he had joined the business school just to keep his mind active. After days of research, late-night discussions, and planning, we finally settled on community-based e-commerce. A niche market, not big but stable. And with Frank's extensive supplier network, securing inventory wouldn't be a problem. We worked non-stop, connecting with communities, ironing out logistics, and in just a few weeks, we covered 30 neighborhoods within a 5-kilometer radius. Each neighborhood had its own exclusive online shopping platform, offering strict quality control and personalized customer service. Word spread fast. Loyal customers returned. Some even started personally requesting my help to source specific items. The income wasn't huge yet, but the foundation was solid. And most importantly, I had built something of my own again. Then one evening Robert called. At first he stumbled over his words, circling around some vague small talk. Then almost reluctantly he sighed. I was just thinking about the past. His voice dipped lower. I miss your cooking. For a second my mind drifted back in time. Back when we had nothing. When money was tight, we always made food that could last a few days. Back then, no matter what I cooked, Robert ate every last bite, always with a satisfied smile. Now he turned his nose up at anything too simple. Instead, he indulged in decadent liquor-filled desserts, drenched in sweetness and luxury. I snapped out of my thoughts. The past was gone, and I had no intention of looking back. 2 days later, Robert invited me to dinner again. This time he even sent 99 roses to my doorstep. A handwritten note was tucked between the petals. Wife, I was wrong. Please forgive me. I let out a short laugh. So, a bouquet of flowers was supposed to erase everything? As if roses, innocent, beautiful roses, could bear the weight of all his lies, selfishness, and betrayal. If only the world worked that way. But I knew Robert too well. This wasn't some sudden revelation of guilt. He hadn't suddenly grown a conscience. Something was wrong. A few phone calls to old acquaintances and the truth became painfully clear. Olivia had screwed up. On her own initiative, she overpaid for an expensive shipment of luxury furs, only for the goods to arrive molded and rotting. Robert had tried to demand a refund, but the supplier simply pulled out the signed contract, clearly stating that the furs had pre-existing defects. Turns out Olivia had pocketed a hefty kickback from the deal. But when confronted, she burst into tears, screamed, and swore she hadn't taken a dime. Robert, unable to prove anything, was forced to swallow the loss himself. The damage didn't stop there. Several longtime business partners, fed up with Robert indulging Olivia's reckless decisions, cut ties completely, worried that staying involved with his company would only lead to more disasters. Just 3 months after I walked away with my $2 million, Robert's business was already bleeding dry. Now he was suddenly full of regret, full of apologies, full of fake kindness. All because he saw my money as his way out. Maybe even my villa too. If he could get both, he'd have just enough to climb his way back. I let out a long, slow breath, feeling an unexpected wave of gratitude toward Michael. If it weren't for his sharp tongue, his mocking push, I might still be stuck in that toxic cycle, drowning in Robert and Olivia's mess. Back then, maybe Michael had just wanted to prove he was in control, maybe he had just wanted to shove me out of his way. Or maybe, deep down, he really had wanted to set me free. Either way, it didn't matter now. What mattered was that I was out. And there was no way in hell I was about to bail Robert out. When I stopped answering Robert's calls, he stationed himself outside my villa. I came home one evening to find him pacing the front gate, looking disheveled and restless. The moment he spotted me, his eyes lit up with desperate hope. He rubbed his hands together, his voice nervous but eager. "Diana, let's grab dinner." I almost said no on the spot. Sensing my hesitation, he quickly added, "Just a meal. I want to talk about Michael." I paused, then gave a small nod. Robert practically sprinted to open the car door for me, the passenger seat. I glanced at the interior. Pink silk ribbons, delicate little cushions, Olivia's touch through and through. Without a word, I turned and walked around to the back seat instead. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Robert instantly dive into the car, rip off the decorations, crumple them into a ball and toss them into the trash. It was almost funny. Robert picked a high-end restaurant, the kind we never used to go to. The kind with antique wooden decor, soft instrumental music, and staff who spoke in hushed, reverent tones. The kind of place he only started frequenting with Olivia. Before. We'd just grab whatever was near home. And I had been perfectly happy with that. Because back then it was never about the food. It was about the three of us, together. Robert rambled about the specialty dishes, flipping through the menu enthusiastically, trying to act like nothing had changed. I set my menu down. "Robert, just say whatever you came here to say." "I'm busy." Robert hesitated. Then finally he sighed heavily. "Diana, my company is in trouble. Can you lend me some money to get through this rough patch?" I slowly turned my glass between my fingers before answering. "No." A flicker of disappointment, then frustration flashed across his face. But he wasn't ready to give up. "Diana, please. Just this once. If I recover from this, all the money I make will go to you and Michael." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Think about it. Michael is my only son. Who else would I be earning for?" I narrowed my eyes. He wasn't wrong. If Robert completely collapsed, it would eventually burden Michael too. A ruined father was still a liability no matter how distant the relationship. I tapped my fingers against the table, thinking. Seconds ticked by. Robert watched me closely, his breath held in anticipation. Finally I asked, "How much do you need?" Robert hesitated, then gritted his teeth and answered. 3 million. I sucked in a sharp breath. The company had always maintained steady profits. Not billions, but the cash flow had always been stable. And yet, in less than a year, it had bled millions? What the hell was Olivia doing, eating money? Robert avoided my gaze, his shoulders slumping. "You know how the market is right now, Diana. Trade is struggling." I cut him off with a cold stare. If I left him in charge, the company wouldn't last 6 more months. And as much as I wanted nothing to do with him, this company was my blood, sweat, and years of sacrifice. It was more than a business. It was like my child. After a long silence, I made my decision. "Robert, I'll inject 2 million into the company. But on one condition." His eyes lit up instantly. "What condition?" I spoke slowly, clearly. "You step down. I take full control as the company's legal representative. You don't have to worry. I'll hand the company over to Michael when he turns 18. Robert's entire face changed. He shot up from his seat, slamming his fists onto the table. "Diana, you venomous woman. You want to steal my company? The money you have, wasn't that from me? What right do you have to take over?" I leaned back in my chair, watching him with an amused smirk. A dying company, barely worth anything now, and he still clung to it like a lifeline. As if I even wanted this rotting corpse of a business. If I really wanted to, I could start a new company tomorrow. I grabbed my bag and walked out. He wasn't worth another second of my time. Less than a month later, it made the news. Olivia had embezzled company funds. When the fraud was exposed, she flat out refused to admit it, hiding behind her pregnancy, crying her way through the accusations. But she didn't just deny the theft, she refused to return the money. In the end, things got so bad that the case went to court. And that wasn't the worst of it. Olivia demanded 5 million from Robert. If he didn't pay up, she threatened to accuse him of domestic abuse and assault. Diana got 2 million and a villa just for being an old hag. Do you really think I, young, beautiful and carrying your child, deserve any less? If you don't give me what I want, I'll report you for tax fraud. Let's see how long you last in prison. I didn't bother following the soap opera drama that was Robert's downfall. I had better things to do, like running my business with Frank, expanding our network, securing new suppliers. Every day was a blur of work and strategy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. Then one afternoon, as I pulled up to Michael's school, Robert appeared, standing by the entrance looking like a wreck. Unshaven. Bloodshot eyes. Like he hadn't slept in days. Michael spotted him first. With a smirk he called out, "Dad, you're really letting yourself go. Looks like you aged 10 years without Mom." Robert rubbed the back of his neck, awkward and flustered. "Your mom does look, well, she looks younger." Michael didn't let up. He took a slow glance at Robert's rumpled shirt and tired face, then asked, voice full of mock concern, "Where's Olivia? Didn't she at least clean you up before letting you leave the house?" Then he added almost sweetly, "She's so fashionable, unlike Mom who only knew how to cook and clean. I'm sure her taste is excellent. What, is this retro vintage her idea of style?" Robert's forced smile finally cracked. He opened his mouth, then shut it. For the first time he had nothing to say. Michael scarfed down the last of the meal I had packed for him, wiped his mouth, then leaned in toward me. "Mom, he wants to get back together. Don't fall for it." I studied Michael's expression. He had chosen to live with his dad after the divorce. If he had a real desire for us to reconcile, I honestly wouldn't know what to do. But before I could ask, Michael wrapped an arm around my shoulders and grinned. "You're so dumb sometimes, Mom. No wonder people take advantage of you." Then his grin faded slightly and he spoke, voice quiet but firm. "From the moment you signed that divorce paper, you became your own person. You live for yourself now, not for anyone else. The happier you are, the better life is for the people you care about." His words hit something deep inside me. I pressed a hand over my mouth, blinking hard to keep my tears from falling. And then I nodded. That evening, I let Robert drive me to the company. It was lifeless. The halls were empty. The office, once bustling, full of energy, was now quiet and cold, except for a few security guards and a handful of old employees. Most of the staff had jumped ship the moment things went south, leaving to secure their own futures elsewhere. The plants were dying, the workspace was in chaos, a reflection of what Robert had allowed to happen. I clenched my fist. No more waiting. No more watching from the sidelines. It was time to take control. I pulled out my phone and dialed the company's lawyer. 10 minutes later he arrived, contract in hand. I turned to Robert, voice steady, sharp. "This is your last chance. Sign over all your shares and I'll inject 2 million to cover your losses. If you keep being stubborn, you won't just lose 20 years of hard work. You'll be looking at jail time." I knew exactly what Robert's plan was. He wanted my money to save the company, but he still wanted to hold all the power. But the truth was he wasn't capable anymore. Maybe once he had some business acumen. But now, his mind was sluggish, eaten away by luxury, alcohol, and poor decisions. I wasn't about to risk everything on him again. Robert stared at the contract, hesitating. Finally he muttered, "Diana, could you at least make me vice president? I swear I'll listen to whatever you say." Vice president? Frank's round, reliable face flashed through my mind. I let out a short laugh. "No. I already have someone in mind." Frank was steady, resourceful, and well-connected. Even with millions in assets, he remained humble and disciplined. He was the kind of partner I could trust. Someone who didn't make decisions driven by greed or impulse. After 30 more minutes of resistance, Robert finally signed the contract, his face dark with unwillingness. When I handed the contract to Frank, he blinked in surprise. Then, with a deep sigh, he muttered, "Diana, you really are a sentimental person." Even though he disagreed with my decision to take over the company, he still stood by me. Together we overhauled the business, analyzing every weak point. We cut down unnecessary departments, shutting down loss-heavy operations like steel trading. We recruited experienced employees, restarting with a focus on household goods, a safer, steadier market. By the time everything was back on track, it was already final season. And this time Michael shocked me. He had actually broken into the top 50. And in French, he ranked first in his class. At the parent meeting, the teacher invited me on stage, asking me to share parenting tips. Standing there, face flushed with embarrassment, I realized the truth. Michael was the one who had changed my life. He was the one who pushed me forward, who forced me to grow, who refused to let me wallow in self-pity. I hadn't raised him. He had raised me. As we left the school, the teacher's words still echoed in my head. If Michael keeps this up, he'll have no problem getting into an Ivy League school. I was still in a daze when Michael grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the car. He shot me a side eye. "Mom, can you stop acting so dumb? This is nothing. What are you going to do if I get into Yale or Stanford? Pass out from excitement." I let out a foolish giggle, grinning from ear to ear. Passing out would be worth it. Michael rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Once the company resumed normal operations, I assigned Robert to warehouse duty. And then, he lost his damn mind. Like some lovesick teenager, he started sending flowers daily, dropping off homemade lunches, and, most embarrassingly, writing cringe-inducing love poems. One day, a note arrived with a fresh bouquet. "Dearest Diana, flowers bloom and wither, the moon waxes and wanes. Yet you remain ever radiant, never fading." I gagged. The flowers and note went straight into the trash. I didn't have time for his midlife crisis romance novel fantasies. I was too busy running a business. Honestly, the only person suffering from all this nonsense was the housekeeper, who had to constantly empty the overflowing trash bins. Then one afternoon, chaos erupted. Frank and I were going over a client's contract, double-checking discrepancies in the shipment reports, when Robert burst into the office and punched Frank straight in the face. The impact sent Frank stumbling backward, nearly collapsing onto the floor. He let out a pained grunt, clutching his side. "What the hell, Robert?" Robert, face twisted in rage, jabbed a finger at Frank. "Stay the hell away from Diana. She's my wife." I rushed to Frank's side, helping him up, checking for injuries. Before I could demand an explanation, Robert stepped in front of me, his voice urgent, desperate. "Diana, I'm the one who truly cares about you. He's just after your money. Can't you see that?" I stared at him. And then I laughed. Of all the ridiculous, delusional things, Frank had never taken a single cent from me. In fact, he had given me resources, connections, and business insight, all without asking for anything in return. Compared to Robert, the difference was night and day. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and shoved the screen in Robert's face. "Take a good look. Does this look like a man who needs to steal money from me?" Robert stood frozen, staring at the screen, his face cycling through shock, confusion, and disbelief. On the display was Frank's profile. A prominent entrepreneur, listed among the most successful private business figures in the industry. Robert had always assumed Frank was just my assistant, a nobody helping with odd jobs. Now, faced with the truth, he mumbled under his breath for a long time before finally blurting out, "Fine. Maybe he's not after your money. But he's definitely after your looks. That's it, he's trying to seduce you." I let out a short, sharp laugh. "Pie looks." Then I turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Robert, in your eyes, wasn't I just some washed-up middle-aged woman? A yellow-faced hag, as your darling Olivia put it?" His mouth opened, then closed, his bravado crumbling. Finally, after an awkward beat, he mumbled weakly, I was blind back then. But now you're different. You're beautiful. You have a certain charm." I shoved him aside and focused on helping Frank to the hospital. On the way there, Frank gritted his teeth against the pain, his forehead slick with sweat. Then out of nowhere he squeezed my hand, his voice low and hesitant. "Diana, actually Robert wasn't entirely wrong." I frowned, turning to him. "What do you mean?" Frank, normally so composed and mild-mannered, suddenly looked like a nervous schoolboy. "I really am after your looks." For a second my brain short-circuited. Then, feeling flustered, I quickly turned to the driver and struck up a random conversation, pretending I hadn't heard anything. That evening when I returned home, Michael was already waiting in the living room. His arms were crossed, his face unreadable. "Mom," he said simply, "I heard what happened today." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" Michael grabbed my hand and pulled me to sit down. "Mom, if you and Frank like each other, just be together." I blinked. "You're okay with that?" "Of course." Then with a small smirk he added, At least this way Dad will finally give up. I studied his face, searching for any trace of hesitation, discomfort, or sadness. But there was none. Just a quiet, steady resolve. So I asked again just to be sure. Michael, he's still your father. Are you really okay with this? Michael met my gaze head-on, his voice firm, unwavering. Mom, he made his choices. And every choice has consequences. You don't owe him anything. You just need to live your life for yourself. If you're happy, I'm happy. I stared at him. This young boy, my son, was no longer a child. He had grown into a man, standing tall, eyes filled with clarity and strength. My little boy had grown up. 1 month later, Frank and I got married. Michael was right. I was only 40. One mistake in love wasn't the end of my story. If anything, it was just the beginning of a new chapter. And this time, I was going to live boldly. I was going to chase my own happiness,